Hello, fellow lovers of the liminal and the weird, and welcome to another video from Liminal Spaces.
Hello, everyone. As you can see, I have Richard Rempel, who is from the channel Vintage SF and is traveling around the world, apparently, visiting YouTubers. This is your second time, right?
That's right. I visited Ira in Montana.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to have you. That's absolutely wonderful to see you here. And today we're going to talk about a short story that both of us have read and decided that neither of us had talked about would be a great opportunity to talk about. And that is Mimsy Were the Borogoves by Lewis Padgett. And Lewis Padgett is actually a husband and wife team, Henry Kuttner. And his wife is C.L. Moore, and they wrote this story together. You want to give us a quick synopsis of the story?
Sure. This story is set in... Actually, there's three settings in this story. The very first part of the story is set way off in the future in perhaps another dimension as well. But somebody from there invents a time machine, and it's a box. And this time machine, they want to send back in time and see if it can come back. And they're sending it back in time to our world.
Yeah.
Because their other dimension is linked to our world.
Yeah.
And so he thought, or the character, there's a strange name to that character. Maybe we'll talk about it later. I can't remember what it was. It starts with the letter U. But the character thinks, oh, I need to put something in there perhaps. And so he puts in some of his kids, his children who have grown up, their toys into this box. And this box is sent back.
Untha Horston.
Untha Horston.
Horston.
Untha Horston. That sounds like a Nordic name perhaps.
Right? Seriously.
So Untha Horston doesn't get his box back. He's puzzled. He has another one. He made two prototypes. So he gets this prototype ready to go back again. He sends it back a little bit further, and he puts more toys in it. And it goes back, doesn't come back, and he's going, oh, I guess it didn't work, or it's something, went wrong. That's it. And that's it for the story for Untha Thorston.
Untha Horston.
We don't see him again.
He's done and out.
He's off to the Nordic Sea or something.
Right, that's right. Yeah.
So then we get the next scene is 1942, and a child finds this box near a river where he's playing out in the woods.
Yeah, he's playing hooky, right?
Oh, is he?
Yeah, he's skipping school.
And so this box, it's not quite into our dimension. There's a physicality to it, but it's not complete there. You can't pull it or anything like that.
Yeah.
So as a kid, what's he do? Grabs a rock, starts banging on it, and it sort of plops out of that alternate dimension and becomes physical.
Yeah, like fourth dimension or whatever.
Yeah.
And it can't open until he knocks it out of that dimension.
And once he's got it, he opens it up, sees the toys, and of course, he's a kid. Loves it.
Yeah, the first one he looks at is this cube that when he looks into it, he can see little people. And he thinks, I want that house to start on fire to see these little people put it out. And just right as he thinks it, the house starts on fire and the little people put it out. And so he has this universe in this tiny little cube that magnifies these tiny little people that do whatever he thinks. But we slowly begin to realize as he plays with them more and more that the toys teach him, that they are helping him learn. Sorry, I didn't mean
That's
to
not a problem. And I think as a teacher, I think sometimes of gamification is something that has been a buzzword in the last, say, 15, 20 years in education, where you use games to teach. This is sort of taking it to the next couple thousand years, perhaps, of how you would teach your children with these toys. That's a premise that we kind of figure out as we're going on, as we see more of the toys. He brings them home, and he wants to hide them from his parents, but his sister, of course, finds it too. And
how old is she? Like 2.5?
I don't remember.
Yeah, her name's Emma, and he is... let me check my notes really quick.
Okay, while you check your notes, I think you're right on that. He also wants to hide this from his parents.
Scott
Scott and Emma.
Yeah.
And so his parents do discover that there's some toys in the house, but he explains it that, hey, my uncle, he bought these toys for us. And they said, well, I've never seen toys like this before.
Yeah.
But they allow them to continue playing with the toys.
Yeah, Uncle's out of town, so they don't...
That's right.
There's no way they can contact him. It's the 40s.
So,
none of these.
So there's a lot of interesting passages where we take a look at the toys themselves.
Yep.
What happens with these toys. We start to see how they're learning.
Yeah.
And they're learning about a paradigm that is not from our paradigm. And so they're learning things that their parents don't know.
Right.
And it starts to become very interesting.
Yeah.
I don't think we want to spoil the story at this point.
Nope. No, that's good.
But I think we could take it to there. What will happen next? And of course, the parents get concerned about them, so they want to bring them to an expert, a psychologist,
Yep.
I believe it is.
Yep.
Holloway, I believe his name is.
Holloway, yep.
And so from there, what will happen? Will these toys be removed from them? What are they learning? Is it going to affect things in the future? And there's that second box still.
Yeah.
What has happened to that second box?
Brilliant story. Really, really fun. So it was originally published under the pseudonym Lewis Padgett, which is what Henry and C.L. Moore, Henry Kuttner and C.L. Moore called it when they worked together. And that was, from what I've read, is based on their mother's maiden names. So they wrote it as a team. It was first published in the February 1943 issue of Astounding Science Fiction magazine. So after its publication, it was voted one of the best science fiction stories before 1965 and included in the Science Fiction Hall of Fame, which was edited by Robert Silverberg and was the creation of what awards?
The Nebula Awards.
The Nebula Awards. After this, every year they started giving the Nebula Award. But when they created the Nebula Awards, they wanted to go backwards and figure out what stories should be kind of considered the cream of the crop from all the years before. And that's what this is. And I think the reason we chose this is because we've both read
Yes.
this. Did you read it or listen to it on audio?
I read it.
I listened to it on audio. But I went back and read this story from it. But yeah, I read this right when my channel was starting, and I was driving to see my brother, and I just saw it on Audible, and I was like, there you go.
That'll keep you awake.
Oh, it
They're
was
great
fun.
stories.
Yeah, they really are great stories. And this is one that I just never ended up talking about, but absolutely loved. So after that, it was published in The Best of Henry Kuttner. I don't know how they decided whose story was whom's, but this one Henry Kuttner got. It is not in The Best of C.L. Moore. So I'm wondering if somehow they knew or their publishers knew, like, which had done what. Or...
Well, you know what? They were a husband and wife team, and there's a lot of confusion necessarily about who really should be credited with some of these. I mean, the money came back to the same family, right?
Yeah.
So some people actually have a hypothesis that maybe C.L. Moore was the primary writer and Henry Kuttner potentially was the editor, or perhaps it's the other way around, or maybe both of them work that way. We don't know. Unless there's somebody out there who could tell us, I would appreciate that if you made a comment on it.
Yeah.
So perhaps they just as a couple decide, okay, you can have that one for that collection.
Yeah. Yeah, they must do. It's the only one I've read. Have you read any more of these authors?
I have read a couple of short stories. These two best of books. We're planning for Ira from Science Fiction Words of Wonder and from Matt from Science Fiction Reads. We go through the best of books, and so these are in our future that we'll be reading these.
Woo-hoo. Maybe I'll join you for one of these.
That would be great.
That would be fun. I'd like that. Yeah, that would be really fun. Yeah, so the prose in this is absolutely outstanding. It wasn't a hard read.
No.
It was a very simple read. I was never really lost. The description of the toys and the philosophy of what it means to be a baby or a child was really interesting, and one of my favorite parts of this story. There's a point where the child psychologist says, children aren't human. And the parents are like, what does that even mean? But when they're babies, they're so different. They require a different kind of love. And I think that this is what the story really gets into, is that they can think in a way that basically, as we teach these children, everything we teach them forces them to think a specific way that we've been taught to think. And the way that the book really gets into it is non-Euclidean geometry. There's actually a section I want to read, if you don't mind. Okay, so this is the therapists or the psychologists speaking to the parents of the children that have the very strange toys. Well, look, let's suppose there are two kinds of geometry. We'll limit it for the sake of the example. Our kind, Euclidean, and another, which we'll call X. X hasn't much relationship to Euclid. It's based on different theorems. 2 and 2 needn't equal 4 in it. They could equal y squared, or they might not even equal. A baby's mind is not yet conditioned except by certain questionable factors of hereditary and environment. Start the infant on Euclid. Poor kid, Jane said. Holloway shot her a quick glance. The basis of Euclid, alphabet, blocks, math, geometry, algebra, they come much later. We're familiar with that development. On the other hand, start the baby with the basic principles of our X logic. And then it goes on from there. This idea that these kids are learning a logic as children that we can't even comprehend. And that core runs throughout the book in such a meaningful and really very well written way that I think makes the story 100% worth it.
It's an alien paradigm that they are learning, even though it's in the future. It's a future paradigm that they're learning in terms of many different things, in language and in mathematics, etc. I think of the studies of the brain plasticity and how a very, very young child is just their brain is being molded by the information that's coming in. And so much of what a baby and a child learn is subconscious. It's the grammar of our speech is being learned. They know automatically as they start to talk how to place their nouns and verbs. And that's what they're getting at here. What if it is a future alien grammar that they're starting to learn?
Yeah. And they even go as far as the little sister learns it quicker and starts scribbling on papers. And the older brother, Scott, is able to comprehend this. And I guess now will be a good place to say I highly recommend this story. This is absolutely a story you should read. And it's a fun read. It's a quick read. It's an easy read, but it will challenge you philosophically all the way around. A great read.
Well deserved to be in that book.
Absolutely. But for now, I want to just go a little bit into spoilers. So from here on out, we're going to spoil the rest of the book. And I think that the real question is, where did that other box go?
That's right. So we see these children learning more and more. The psychologist really recommends that they take away the toys because he's concerned that they're learning a different paradigm. So they take away the toys, but the children are still trying to build things out of like rocks and tinfoil and sticks, and the parents clean it up eventually, but they still try to make these things, and we're not quite sure what that's all about. Then we actually get to the second box. This is the third story in here. We meet a young girl and her uncle, who is not
Charles.
Truly her uncle, but a friend of the family's who she calls Uncle Charles. And this girl has found that box and has some toys in there. And she's a creative girl, and she's talking about poetry and stories and asking her Uncle Charles, who apparently writes, could he put these poetry or stories into some of his books? Yeah,
so what it turns out, and this is really brilliant that the way that they put this together, is he's talking about Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass. And the child that we're meeting is telling stories to her Uncle Charles, who is Lewis Carroll. I think his full name was Charles Dobson. And he doesn't really understand the stories and is trying to edit them to make more sense. But she's trying to have him write them very specifically to what she's narrating. And she's narrating these stories that seem like absolute nonsense, and he writes them down. Of course, is very successful with Alice in Wonderland, but they're working on Through the Looking Glass, and they're working specifically on the poem Jabberwocky, and Alice is forcing him to write it down exactly as she says it, even though it is nonsense. So they're talking about the Jabberwocky, and she's telling him, you can't change it. You can't change anything. And he says, I won't change the stanza anyway, he promised. Just what does it mean? And she says, it's the way out, I think. The girl said doubtfully, I'm not sure yet. My magic toys told me. And unfortunately, she never is able to use this way out, we learn. Recasting Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass in this light was really brilliant, and it was so unexpected for me when I first listened to it driving to Colorado. I didn't expect to be reading a science fiction story and talking about the Jabberwocky from Alice in Wonderland, and that's part of the brilliance of this story, is saying that the third person that received these toys, that is able to speak in this what do they call it, X dimension, writes it down in books, or has Lewis Carroll write it down in books for her, is really brilliant. And that, of course, we don't see Alice after that. It's just one little section from her, but it connects very specifically to what happens to Scott and Emma.
That's right. And Mimsy were the Borogoves is one of the lines in that stanza that is put accurately into the story.
Yeah.
So, of course, these children in 1942, this is a very popular book. It's something they have access to, and we find that they are reading this book. And the message that it was the way out is not necessarily going to work out for Alice, but for Scott and Emma.
Yeah.
They put it together with these structures that they're creating. Yeah. And then their parents, there's a phone call to the dad.
Yeah, the mom's calling.
The mom's calling the dad.
Yeah.
But there's something weird going on upstairs. Yep. And so he doesn't answer the phone. And he runs upstairs. And he's there just in time to see his kids dissipating like smoke.
Terrifying.
Evaporating into the air. They found their way out. They found out through the words and through what they're structuring their way out into that X dimension, that potentially the future dimension that people move on to from our Earth. Kind of is interesting if you think about afterlives as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really the question of the book, is where do these kids end up? Mm-hmm. Are they in future Earth, or, like you said, through another dimension? It's really, really brilliant. And I'd love, there's one part that I think of where the dad is like, why'd you put this pebble here? And Scott's like, well, a round thing has to be there, obviously. And the dad just can't, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever to the dad. It's really a brilliant look at the concept of what would happen if we just sent toys back in time. What would happen if I got a box of toys and sent it back to, beginning of evolution of humans or whatever? It would be wild. It'd be like 2001 with the monolith, right? It would be just incomprehensible to whoever saw them. And would it give people a jump to play with toys from the future? Really a wonderful idea story. I really like these kind of idea stories.
And then we sort of talked about the last couple lines.
Yeah.
At first I was confused, but then remembering that the mom had been calling him originally, it ends with Dad is just in shock.
Yeah.
And the last line is about the phone starts to ring again.
Yep.
What is he going to say to his wife?
Yeah.
And it's just a poignant, almost melancholic, bit of horror to the end of it.
Yeah, it's weird. If you're the children, it's probably super exciting.
Yeah.
If you're the parents, it's terrifying.
That's right.
Yeah, it's really scary. So, Mimsy were the Borogoves. You got anything else you want to say about that one?
No, I think that covers it.
Yeah, absolutely. Go out, give this a read. And this whole book is fantastic.
Definitely recommend it.
Yeah, give it a read. Yeah, if you like this video, click like. If you like this kind of content, subscribe. Also, head over to Richard's channel, Vintage SF. He does great stuff. I'll put a link to it down in the description. Go give him a subscribe as well. Thank you very much for watching.
This was lots of fun. Thank you, Chris.
You bet. Thank you for being here.